Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and welcome to this new video where finally we're going to talk about a case study, and specifically we're going to talk about a Google Ads case study. By the way, just to be clear, I'm talking about Google Ads for hotels and not Google Hotel Ads. So essentially, we're not talking about the meta search engines in this case. We're just talking about or specifically talking about Google Ads for hotels, so campaigns run on Google Ads. Google Hotel Ads is a different story. I know sometimes, especially for newbies, may be a little bit confusing, but essentially the reason why I actually wanted to shoot this video and to share a case study way before. The point is that, of course, due to the pandemic situation, there were no relevant data, or at least the data was not, reliable enough in order to create a consistent case study. And of course, during that period, during the lockdown period, let's put it this way, essentially we're not actually running campaigns on Google Ads, and nor on Facebook Ads, and nor anything. So essentially, the marketing side of the hotel, or many hotels all over the globe, were essentially shut down. Now that, considering this time we're in June, almost July 2021, we are in the middle of summer season in many locations all over the globe. We have seen a little bit of consistent rebounding activities put forth by many hotels all over the globe, or at least in many destinations and many locations all over the globe, and therefore also marketing campaigns have started rebounding, and therefore now we finally have some reliable data, some consistent data, and I have specifically chosen this case study. It's the reason why is because it's not extremely difficult. It's relatively easy to understand. We're gonna see many things, but it's the path and the flow is relatively easy to follow. And most importantly, many of the things and many of the findings that I'm gonna be sharing with you in this case study are essentially things that I see quite often with many hotels. So in other words, these problems may also be your problems, right? Partially, totally, that's of course totally up to you to see and to check. But many of the things that I am going to share now in a moment, they're quite common problems, all right? And they're quite easy to detect. So that said, let's get it started. So first of all, let's start with the request, all right? So I got asked to perform a Google Ads audit, and this essentially was the request. It's a copy paste, all right? I just removed some useless part in order to make it compressed, but anyway, this is the heart of the request. We just noticed that PPC performance for hotel name has been very poor in recent months, to the point where they spent about $670 in April and only made $485 in revenue. So essentially, we are losing money on ads. All right, so 670 is the ad spent for the whole month of April 2021, and apparently the revenue generated from those ads was even less than the amount spent. All right, so now let's get it started. This is the request, this is the macro problem, so let's start with a macro view, all right? So let's get into the problem. First of all, we need to see what's the current situation, what the situation was back then, and eventually compare the two things in the two periods. So considering the situation, so I took the month of April, which was mentioned in the email, and I compared with, for example, November, which was kind of an apples-to-apples comparison period that we can, of course, compare to April, where the apparently, or at least listening to what this client was telling me about, apparently in November 2020, the Google Ads campaign were performing well. So I just took these 2 months and trying to compare apples to apples, see what happens, what's the difference. Of course, the situation was different back then, all right? So we are not necessarily comparing everything apples to apples. So we're just trying to find let's say a lead or an indication as to where the problem is, as to where the main differences are comparing these 2 months. And as we can see, well, first of all, the traffic is increasing. We're not losing revenue. We might be losing revenue, but we are not definitely losing traffic. Overall, not just talking about the traffic coming from the campaigns, but again, macro view. Overall, the traffic is increasing. The blue line is April, the orange line is November. As you can see, the first half of the month, comparing the 2 months, are pretty much the same, but the second half of April, April kind of outperformed November. On the bottom of the screenshot, you can also see a bunch of parameters and metrics and the comparison between the two. And as a matter of fact, you can see that essentially traffic in terms of session went up 11%, almost 12%, and users about more than 20%. But what you can also see is that the revenue, which is the last column of the screenshot of the table under the timeline, is up 26%. So traffic up, increasing about, in terms of session, 11%. But the revenue is 76% higher than in November. Which again, by the way, if you compare it to periods, it makes have sense, because in November we're still in the middle of the pandemic, and April is the beginning of the rebound. By the way, I didn't tell you this hotel. I will not reveal, of course, the hotel name, but this hotel is in the US, all right, so United States, specifically is in Chicago. So, all right, I'm going to share with you some of the things and some of the context about Chicago. And but of course, I'm not going to reveal the hotel name for maintaining the privacy, and any sensitive data is going to be hidden. But okay, this is what happens, and that 76%, logically speaking, makes sense, all right? So in April is, of course, starting rebounding, whilst in November the situation was totally flat. But you can see this report is just a Google Analytics report, not even a Google Ads report. A Google Analytics report is specifically the all traffic channel. So under the acquisition menu or macro menu, you head into all traffic and channels, and you actually see this one. Now let's keep move on, and let's dig in a little bit further, because this is the exact same report. I just scroll underneath a little bit. Well, actually, it's not necessarily the same report, sorry, because this is another one, because I moved into the all traffic, because essentially what I wanted to see is that what's the overall traffic, all right? So what's the overall performance of the hotel, no matter the specific of the campaigns, all right? So the traffic and the revenue generated by the campaigns. But I wanted to have a sort of drill down view of all the options. So essentially all the channels, including organic channels and paid channels. And as you can see, again, comparing the 2 months, so April 2021 and November 2020, well, that's a spike. The $484 that you see in here is the revenue generated, and by the way, if you remember, is the exact same amount that it was mentioned in the initial request, in the initial email. If you remember, it was $670, so $670 of ad spend and $484 in generated revenue. So one campaign generated 100% of the revenue from all the campaigns. However, that same campaign back in November performed actually $2,400. So it's totally underperforming. But you can already see from here that the problem is not necessarily the revenue. But let's move forward and let's move in about the, let's see the same, essentially the same thing from a timeline perspective. So not from a report perspective, but from a timeline perspective, because visually speaking, we don't necessarily need to look into the numbers, but we can visually see, and therefore it's easier to detect what the problem is. And here you can clearly see that the problem is not necessarily the revenue, but the traffic, right? Because the campaigns of the hotel generated 76% less traffic from the campaigns as opposed to November. So in other words, the overall traffic is the same, well, actually is increasing overall. In April, the traffic is increasing, but specifically the traffic coming from a Google campaign or Google Ads campaign is decreasing by 76%. So the revenue is naturally a consequence of a huge decrease in the traffic, in the paid traffic. And again, whilst the overall traffic actually increased. And this report is essentially the same area, so Google Analytics, acquisition campaigns, and all campaigns. And now let's move on to AdWords, so former AdWords and now Google Ads, and let's see a little bit, and try to get a little bit of information from there. Now, as you can see, comparing the 2 months, so you don't see it, but essentially I have selected the same 2 periods, so essentially the same period, which is April 2021, comparing with November 2020. Now, this is what the situation was comparing the 2 months. In other words, including the 2 months, these are the 4 campaigns that were on either in November 2020 or April 2021, or probably both. All right, so this is where we will need to be focusing on. The 2020 paid search is the only one in green because it's currently, so June 2020, so 2 months after the analysis, well, not the analysis, but essentially the period under examination is the only one available, but that's beyond the point. What we need to focus on is that these are the 4 campaigns that were on either in April or in November. Now, a little bit of more details. The campaign called One Branded was off in November, but on in April. And you can see it from the cost, for example, because, well, actually you can see it from all the 3 metrics, cost conversion and cost conversion, simply because the amount that you see, $49.27, is the amount spent in April 2021. And opposite to it, an increase of $49.27, so 100% increase as opposed to November 2020. In other words, in November, this campaign was actually not there. Probably was not yet created, or probably it was there but turned off. In other words, it was not going. It was not actually performing. The campaign 2020 display was on November 2020, so it's the other way around. It was on 2020, but off probably not the full month, but almost the entire month of April 2021, because it's the opposite of branded. Now you can see that there is a decrease in $399. One in April only spent $28. All right, so that is another thing that we need to consider. Another thing that we need to consider is that both the 2020 display and One Branded campaigns generated few conversions. I'm not even talking about the revenue. We're going to be looking at it in a moment, but they didn't generate much conversion. Actually, the 2020 display didn't generate any conversion in April. It converted, at least it generated 10 conversions back in November, but also the branded campaign, it generated 9 conversions. But yeah, we're still talking about very little numbers, let's put it this way. So besides, the other thing that we need to consider and that we just talked about is that the 2020 paid search was off in April, but on in November. And the other way around for the campaign category. All right, if you understand how to read these numbers, so for example, category $592 spent is plus 100% spent as opposed to November, and the other way around for paid search. All right, so one was on in November, the other one was on in April, and the other way around. All right. The last thing we need to consider is the advertising costs, which were pretty much similar. So in November, $761 ad spent as opposed to $670 in April. That said, let's jump into the real problem. All right, so we have created the background. We have a little bit of ground information, and now we can definitely check what the problem was. And the problem was, well, let's start from this campaign. The 4 campaigns, these are the same 4 campaigns that we've seen in Google Ads, the Google Ads console. Now we moved back onto Google Analytics and comparing apples to apples, so trying to have a look at a bunch of additional metrics. All right, so traffic, users, bounce rate, page sessions, and of course a transaction, and also, and more importantly, the revenue generated. So as you can see, the 2020 paid search, which again, it was a campaign that was on in November and off in April, of course, it generated revenue in November, $2,300. But the let's say the other campaign that was on in April, which was category, so the campaign listed as number 3, didn't produce a single dime, all right? So didn't generate any revenue. As you have seen before, the only campaign that in April generated a little bit of revenue was the first one, branded, $484. But we are trying to compare apples to apples and trying to see what eventually worked or used to work back in November and what actually didn't work in April, recently in April. And as you can see, the problem stands in the line number 3 and line number 4. Line number 4 generated revenue in November, line number 3 didn't generate any revenue in April. Category, now you don't see the numbers here, already generated. You're going to be showing you in the next slide actually, the campaign called category didn't generate any revenue. However, as we're going to see in a moment, it generated 73 conversions. So 73 conversions, but no revenue. And how is that even possible? Because essentially conversions in Google Ads are not necessarily and all the times bookings, right? They may be something else, but we're going to get into it in a moment. So let's go step by step and let's try again to compare apples to apples, and let's try to see a little bit more details of the two campaigns, so category in April 2021 and 2020 paid search for November 2020. All right. So I know the labels may be a little bit misleading or confusing, but okay, let's just try to follow and let's see what exactly the problem was by comparing these two. Now, April 2021, this is the campaign that was on in April 2021. The campaign cost $558. Compared to the whole amount ad spent of the month is 83% of the entire monthly budget. Right, so these campaigns 83% consumed 83% of the monthly budget or the monthly ad spend. What's important in terms of quality now is to understand, okay, what's the problem, or at least trying to find an indication as to why this campaign spent a lot but didn't generate value. And if you can see, besides the keyword, the quality of the keyword, we'll jump into it in a moment, but if you see this side, the quality of the keywords, or at least the type of the keyword, they're all broad match types. And broad match types are quite tricky in a way, right? In the sense that, I'm not getting into the details, but essentially broad match type generate really a broad match opposed to the keyword, relative to the keyword that is being generated, that has been added to the keyword set in Google Ads. So Chicago hotel room generate a whole bunch of potential keywords. And as we're going to look at it in a moment, they may be very, very, very tricky. But let's move on. Now, first of all, we talked about before the 73 conversions of this campaign. Same report. This is the exact same report that we've seen before. But we talk about this campaign generated conversions, but no revenue. And how is that possible? Well, you can check the conversion actions. All right, what kind of conversions were listed as conversion under these keywords. In other words, you know that in Google Ads, conversion are not only reservation, but it may be, for example, call from ads, as we have seen here. It may be a form, someone submitting a form. It may be someone clicking on a telephone number on the website. It may be many different things, but all these, they're not necessarily macro conversion. They're technically micro conversion or macro conversions. So no reservations, and therefore no revenue. No revenue at all. And that's why that campaign, at least in Google Analytics, didn't generate any revenue, or at least from the reports that we have seen in Google Analytics, it seems like they didn't generate any revenue. And this is the first problem. The second thing that we need to check is about, okay, but what exactly, this is the most important thing. Why did this campaign, why did this keyword didn't generate any revenue? And if we check and if we go further, and this is, by the way, one of the most common problem that I see when we see analysis about the keywords or keywords quality and whatsoever, that we just evaluate the quality of the keywords, but we don't really dig into what search terms exactly triggered those keywords. And this is the report that you can see by simply looking into the very first keyword that was seen in the previous report. You can see it on top in blue, keyword Chicago hotel room. And this is the list of search terms, meaning what actually people type into the Google search bar that triggered these keywords. And look at them, they are totally broad, they are totally out of context, they are totally out of interest, they are not relevant. Most of them are competitors, all right? So brand name of competitors. In other words, this is pure traffic. And as you can see, then whoever was actually managing the campaign or the ad account of this hotel had the idea of excluding, as soon as they see these search terms being generated or being these search term triggering those keywords, they were not of any interest for the hotel. They actually excluded them. So essentially they added them as negative keywords. Good luck doing like this, because when you have such a generic keywords in broad match type, potentially, with not the right filter, potentially every single hotel, in this case in Chicago, can trigger those keywords. Because that's the goal, that's what the broad match type keywords are meant for. So excluding low quality search terms with this kind of setup may definitely turn into an endless task without actually getting any positive result in return. Now let's do the same thing with what happened back then in November. All right, so because you have seen now what the problem was in April, but let's see what the situation was in November, because was that so good? All right, was that so fine that, for example, it generated revenue? So what exactly worked back then so that we can try eventually to replicate? And the point is that, by the way, this is, the disclaimer is that in here, potentially in reality, there is the hotel name listed as keyword. You don't see it, and instead of them, I have replaced the real keyword, so manually hard-coded the HTML of the page. I hard-coded the code in order to see and to replace the real hotel name with a fake hotel name, which is in this case Hotel Atalanta. All right, so if you see, for example, the third line is Atalanta Hotel Chicago, well, that's not really it. I just replaced the real hotel name with Atalanta Hotel Chicago, of course, for maintaining the privacy of the hotel. Same thing for line number 4, for the keyword number 4, for keyword number 5, and so on and so forth. But you see, other than that, rest assured that everything is authentic. All right, I just had to do that manually in order to maintain privacy and to be able to show this report. Otherwise, it would have been impossible. Now let's do the same analysis as we've done before. Now the cost of this campaign back in November 2020 was $205, which was way lower in terms of budget share. 27% of the entire monthly budget was spent for this campaign. And this is the campaign that generated essentially all the revenue back in November 2020. The most important thing, like I said, though, is about the keywords. All right, like I said, I replaced the real hotel name. They're still in broad match, but if you look into the keywords, they're no longer just generic keywords like hotel in Chicago or boutique hotel Chicago, but if you see, for example, again, the third line is the brand name. All right, so hotel Chicago with the brand name, hotel brand, brand name boutique hotel. So that's all included in this campaign as well. Still broad match, so let's do the same as before. First of all, let's check the conversion. What kind of conversions did these keywords generated? And as you can see, I just picked that is again same as before. It's the same report. I just included and segmented the report to include the conversion actions. And as you can see, now we no longer have a call from ads, but we also have transactions. Transactions are revenue. So macro conversions. For all the 3 top keywords of these campaigns, we have a revenue generated. Now, I didn't put it as a bullet point, but if you compare the 3 keywords. So the first one, hotel in Chicago, the second one, boutique hotel Chicago, the third one, hotel Chicago, Atalanta Hotel Chicago. The third one, which is the brand name, produced way less number of impressions. So actually it triggered the campaign, the keywords, probably 7-8 times less than the first one, hotel in Chicago. So if you compare the impressions, however, it generated probably 6, 7, 8 times as much revenue as the first one, which makes sense. It's a brand related keyword, all right? So when someone searches for a brand, it's more likely closer to the purchase moment, all right? And therefore it's highly chances, especially depending on the attribution model of the campaigns, the conversions, that these keywords are going to generate more revenue. But besides, this is another thing or another problem. So let's move on and let's see again after that. We have seen the conversion, but now let's see what exactly triggered those keywords. In other words, what are the actual search terms that generated those keywords? And as you can see, I just picked, because otherwise it would have been a very long report. I just picked the first two generic keywords. So as we've seen from the previous report, hotel in Chicago and boutique hotel Chicago. What are the search terms that trigger those keywords? And you can see from yourself, all of the first, at least the first 5 keywords are all brand related search terms. All right. So even though the keyword is generic keywords, so hotel in Chicago, boutique hotel Chicago, brand related search terms were actually the ones triggering those keywords. Why? Because those keywords are again in broad match type. Besides, only these two keywords generated, so these two keywords meaning hotel in Chicago and boutique hotel Chicago, generated $297 in revenue, all right, so conversion value. But if you have a deeper look into which terms actually brought the conversions, it's just the brand related terms. So the conversion value, as you can see, is not zero only in the first 3 search terms, which are brand related terms. You see, this is what happens anyway. And why I'm saying so? Because even though the hotel was under the assumption that back then in November 2020, the campaigns were performing well, actually the campaigns were not performing well, because yes, we're generating revenue, but the search terms and the keywords did not match. Meaning the hotel was assuming that they were getting traffic for very broad and very generic keywords. How cool is to get the reservations and revenue for someone searching for hotel in Chicago? But that's not true, because the reality is that the campaigns and the revenue generated was anyway generated from a brand related search terms. Now, if you remember, this screen, this is the same screen that we have seen at the very beginning, the very first screenshot that I show you from Google Ads. So comparing again the two periods, these are the 4 campaigns that were on either in April or in November or both. There was this campaign, the branded campaign, all right? Because we have seen the generic keywords being triggered by brand related terms. Why were they not included in the branded campaign? Because the branded campaign in April was up and running. Now, we will need to see actually the conversion value. So what exactly generated? Because we see from the screenshot on the right, the branded campaign in April spent $49 across the full month, all right? One full month, 30 days, $49 spent. And as you can see from this other screenshot, April 1st, April 30, 2021, the conversion value, meaning reservations, is $487. We are still comparing this amount of money, this amount of revenue, with more than $203,000 generated back in November 2020. And there is already an indication in the sense that branded campaign, $49, simple as that, is too little money, all right? So it's too little budget, or it's too little ad spend for that campaign. And there could be 2 possible reasons. First, the campaign was created or was turned on lately during the month. Like here we are comparing or we are considering the full month of April, but probably the campaign was turned on like towards the end of the month, or probably the budget was simply too low. So either or, all right? It is one of these two options. And in order to answer these questions, we need to check, or one of the options, we need to check essentially the campaign history, all right? So the change history, sorry. Change history simply tells what was the situation back then and what kind of changes have been applied in time to this specific campaign. And in here that I can see is that the campaign has a current budget now, June 2021, currently has a budget of $5.60 per day. However, as you can see from the two lines below, first, April 27, 2021, the budget increased from $1.50 to $2.80, all right? In other words, up until April 27, this campaign was set up with a daily budget of $1.50 daily. And then increased a couple of weeks later from $2.80 to $5.60. But for the full month of April, at least up until the end, the 27th of April, this campaign only got a budget of $1.50 daily. In other words, it's too little budget. Think about of the average CPC, as you've seen below. I think, as we've seen before, now I'm not getting back, but I think it was around 34 cents a CPC. So a single click cost the hotel $34 Simple math, it's less than 5 clicks, meaning less than 5 clicks daily, not necessarily the reservation, less than 5 clicks to the ad, well, erode the full budget. It's too little money. And that's why the brand-related search terms, who in April were moved from a generic campaign to a brand-related campaign, could not perform because the budget here was too low. And this is the very end. So summary, the reason why the decrease in the amount of traffic generated as a consequence a decrease in the revenue, right? Campaign 2020 paid search, highest revenue generating campaign back in November, was off in April. However, as we've seen, the hotel didn't lose money necessarily, at least not in absolute terms, because the hotel anyway generated revenue. Actually, we've seen more traffic. It was around 11% more sessions, and 76%, as far as I remember, increased in revenue. Actually, I don't remember, but anyway, the revenue was higher, way higher in April overall as opposed to November. As a matter of fact, that revenue generated from the campaign in November probably shifted, definitely shifted to organic channels. So either meta search, organic channels, so direct, book direct, or whatsoever, or meta search campaigns. Finally, the biggest problem, well, not the biggest problem, part of the problem is that the branded campaign, it was supposed to have to be a brand protection campaign, has too little budget to perform, and therefore no revenue from the campaigns. This is pretty much it. I think this is a bunch of suggestions that, very, very, very broad suggestions that I told you hotels to perform and to put forth. But anyway, this is pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I definitely suggest you to check, if you have been running campaigns, always check search terms, especially if you have been running broad match type. Broad match type keywords are always very tricky. If you have, but now even the phrase match and exact match are kind of tricky, so always check the exact search terms that generate and that trigger your keywords, because you might find very surprising results in there, and therefore you don't want to waste your money in that way, as we have seen in this case study. That's really it. Thanks so much for following, and if you like, just comment or shoot me a message and I'll be more than happy to reply. Take care and good